All right, you guys can have a seat. Let's get a good one in. Good morning, everybody. Good to see all of you guys. If this is your first time here at Hill City, my name is John Wagler. I'm part of this team here, and just grateful you're spending a part of your Sunday here, and we hope that this becomes a place you can call home. We believe that everyone should have a home church where they're growing in community with one another and exploring what it means to follow Jesus at a deeper level. So thank you for being here today. We have so much going on during this season, and so I want to just highlight a few things for you guys. On June 1st, we have a women's night coming up, and all this stuff you can, on your QR code that's around you, you can scan it and find out all the information towards what's happening here on the event side. June 1st, women's night. June 8th, men's night coming up. That's what I'm talking about, and I love that. We have this share offering that's still going on right now, and so if you're not familiar with the share offering, what we do is once a year, we ask everyone to give one day's wage. We take all that money that comes in and we give it all away to our partners. And thank you guys so much that have already hopped in on that. We'll be leaving it open for another week and a half or so. And last year we gave away $270,000 just that offering. We've been it's great. Over the years, been able to give away about $2.5 million through all of that. So we're in that midst right now, accomplishing that. And then an Alpha course is coming up. So if you guys don't know what Alpha is, it's this beautiful video series that is put together by this guy named Nikki Gumbel. And what they do is you go through kind of big questions about Christianity. It's like truly wonderful. So if you're someone who's like it's going to tie in today's message a lot, but if you're trying to figure out, like, how do I share my faith in a better way, like, this is a great course to take. If you've got people in your life that are exploring their faith, this is a great thing to, like, do it with them. And so they're going to meet here, and so there's information on that's happening as well. And then the last thing is, and it does impact you guys, traditionally, what's happened over the years is when we've been at 3 services, we do summer hours starting on Memorial Day weekend. So that's actually next weekend. And so for the summer, we're going to go back to 2 services just for the summer months, and then we'll be back at 3 services in the fall. But we'll be back to 9 and 10:45 starting next week. All right. So if you come at 9:30, you'll be late. And so you'll have to stay for the second one just to get the full breadth of it. But so 9 and 10:45 next week. And so we're trying to just think about what happens with people's summers and how to best serve the team and people. So we're in this series called For the Good of Richmond. And we've been in it for several weeks now, and we'll be in it for several more weeks. And the heart behind it is trying to get us to understand there's something bigger that's going on. There's something, I want to increase our vision, increase our wonder, increase what we believe we're capable of in all of this, and begin to discover what God might do and what God could do if we all just stepped in with this heart and the right kind of mindset through all of it. And one of the questions I wrote down this week was this. If people got their view of Jesus from their experience with us as a church, what would they say about him? And just sat with that for a little while. And ironically, and we'll see Chance's story here in a few minutes, she says something very similar. So clearly God wanted us to wrestle with this question. But if it's something what would they discover? A lot of it's good, honestly, a lot of it's good. But when we're not gathered all like this, what would people discover? What if you are the only, version of Jesus they ever get to see? What would they discover? What would they wonder about Jesus? What would they think Jesus is actually like? And to begin to wrestle with, do I have the right kind of heart around this? And do I have the right kind of vision of how I begin to see the world around me? I start thinking about, what can impact our vision? What can impact how we start thinking about what we're capable of? It's will discipline matter? Yes, we've talked about that. Will bigger vision matter? Yes, we've talked about that. Will greater mindset matter? Yes, we've talked about that. We'll open ourselves up to the Spirit of God and how the Spirit might move in our lives. Does that matter? Yes, we will talk about that in the upcoming weeks on what that was like. But I started to ask myself some more questions. And so I'm inviting you guys into my brain, which is arguably not a fun place. And so here's the first question. If no one new came to follow Jesus this year, what would happen inside of us? So if it's like we are what we are, and we get to the end of the year and we're like, no one new came to know Jesus, like what would happen inside of you? Would you care? Would it move the needle at all? Like what would actually happen? And again, the answers to these questions are just answer them honestly. I'm not saying you're right or you're wrong. I'm just like, just answer them honestly. That's the only way to do it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would I rate my urgency for people to know Jesus? When I think about my life, when I'm leaving here today, like what's my urgency? When I go into work, when I go to school, or whatever, I'm just at home, when I'm in my neighborhood, and whatever it is, like what's my urgency if I were to scale it 1 to 10? Are we more concerned with preserving the found or pursuing the lost? If you're not familiar with this kind of language, Jesus talks about this, and we'll actually reference one of his stories. But for Jesus, when he talks about the lost and found, he's like, hey, when you're found, you've found purpose, you've found hope, you found life, you found what it means to be human, and you find that through Jesus. That's what it means to be found, and outside of that, Jesus was like, hey, we were lost. For many of us in this room, like we remember what that story was like. I was lost and then I was found. Or maybe this question here, how many people that I know would come to follow Jesus if all of my prayers were answered? So today, like you're leaving here and Jesus is like, hey, I'm going to answer every single one of your prayers. How many people come to know Jesus because of that? What does it say about our hearts? And this last one, what kind of church would we need to be if our deepest joy would be seeing people come to know Jesus? Like, what would it be like? Would you be willing to sacrifice all of your preferences, every single one of them, if it meant one more person would come to know Jesus? How much does it matter? I mean, like, what are we willing to do? But Wags, we've done it this way for 10 years. But what if it's like not the right way to do it anymore? And what if it was like, hey, we're going to be in a tent outside with no air conditioning and no kids programming, and this is the best way to do it, but man, one more person's going to come to Jesus. Would every single person in this room be like, I will buy the tent, right? But is that our hearts? Like what is our deepest longing, our deepest joy that we can have? We're going to be in Hebrews chapter 12 to start off here this morning. I'm going to wrestle with this question of like, where's my heart at with all of this? Like, am I really for the good of Richmond? Am I really tapping into this deep level that Jesus has for me and the kind of heart for my community and for people around me? So if you are able, can you stand for today's reading? In Hebrews chapter 12, it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders it and the sin that so easily entangles. And so the writer of Hebrews is saying, like, hey, like, don't forget, there's a bigger story here. But also, it's like so easy to be entangled by stuff. In our minds, in our actions, in our behaviors, like the world can happen so quickly. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on who? The pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Amen? You guys can be seated. When the writer of Hebrews, he's getting into this, and he's like, hey, I want you to have like a bigger picture of what's going on. I know it's so easy to get fixated on ourselves and our own life. But for thousands of years now, even like right now as we're reading this passage, for thousands of years, there have been people who've sacrificed their lives to say Jesus is Lord. Have been willing to step in and sacrifice everything they have so that people would come to know the truth of who Jesus is. But there's all these witnesses that have come before us. And some of you have family members who have since gone on. But there's all these witnesses, this cloud of witnesses have come before us about this truth of who Jesus actually is. And so there's a bigger story at play than simply like our life and however many years we have on this planet. That there's something bigger that's going on. There's something bigger for us to wrestle with. And the writer's like trying to get to stir the hearts of people, saying like, you have a race to run. Run it with perseverance. Run it with understanding that there's a joy that's set before us when you fixate your mind and your heart and your thoughts on the reality of Jesus. I get it. The world comes at us, the culture comes at us, life comes at us, suffering, pain comes at us, and all those things are true, but fixate on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, and you have a race to run. How many lives do you get? One. It's like, run it. Run it well. Don't be lazy with it. Don't run it for another purpose. Don't run it, let things hinder you and entangle you and live your life for something else and become numb to the world around you. Don't do that. Fixate on the reality and truth of Jesus. Have a deep passion to see others begin to discover the reality and the truth of Jesus. But it's so easy for us to have junk surround us. I was thinking about this story in Luke chapter 15. I'm going to read it here in a second, but it's a parable that Jesus was talking about, and this woman who's lost a coin. And what she does to find it and how valuable it is, and this deep heart to find the things that are actually valuable. And when I was reading that story, I was thinking about this as a reminder to celebrate what heaven celebrates. So often we celebrate things that aren't necessarily what heaven celebrates. We celebrate things that we were never intended to get super excited about. We can celebrate fun things with sports or at school or something that happens at a job. You get a promotion. Those are fun things to celebrate. Those are joyful things, and it's all good. But am I fixated on celebrating the things that heaven celebrates? That I'm constantly going back to, like, is this what it is? Is this what it is? Like the great cloud of witnesses just got excited because I got an A? Maybe. That's a good thing. But I'm talking about like things that have, like, I just got a $15,000 raise. Is the great cloud of witnesses being like, yes, you did it, yes. I don't know. There's just something deeper that's going on that should, like, those are good things to celebrate, but do I celebrate what heaven celebrates? You've probably heard a line like this before. It's a leadership quote that's gotten tossed around for years, but what gets celebrated gets repeated. And so we often celebrate the wrong things in our lives. And so we celebrate bad habits, and they get repeated. We celebrate certain ways of gossip, certain things of lying, or certain things that have like gotten us to a certain point. We celebrate those things because we've advanced in certain ways, and it's like those are things that get repeated. And it's like, what am I actually celebrating in my life? Is the things that heaven celebrates, that God celebrates, that the witnesses, the cloud of witnesses around us celebrate. In Luke chapter 15, Jesus is talking about this idea and trying to describe what it means to have a heart to celebrate the right things, to have a heart for those that are lost, and how valuable every person is to God. And those that follow Jesus should have the same heart towards other people. And so there's this story he tells, and he says, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin. In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of angels of God over one sinner who repents. I was thinking about this idea of like the value and how much the woman is described here as like, I will sweep anything out of the way because this one coin is so important. I think about, man, that this is how God thinks about his people. This is how God thinks about just like when you were lost. Think about this. When you were lost, and you came to a faith in Jesus and decided to follow Jesus, that God was so concerned for your well-being, so concerned for your life, so concerned for you to see who you're designed to be in your fullness, so concerned. He's like, man, I would sweep anything out of the way to make sure you are found. But what happens is that for us, we let the junk surround us. We let the idea of maybe being scared, or living in fear. I don't know enough. I haven't done enough. We let all these things crowd in. You start working a ton, you start getting fixated on all the wrong things, or you get so concerned with school, or so concerned with work, or so concerned with relationships, or so concerned with all these other things, and you become numb to the world around you. And this junk builds up, and we haven't swept in a long time. We have these things that begin to hinder us, that entangle us, and we just let it go. And Jesus is teaching, he's like, no, what kind of person are you going to be? Those that follow me, man, your heart is like, I don't want anything to hinder me in the way from finding those that are lost. From a deep heart to discover like who around me just like needs to know Jesus. Do you have that kind of heart? Are we willing to celebrate? Or this idea of repenting. In this room, how many of you guys have repented of something ever? Yeah. Did you ever think about in that moment when you repented and it's like, no, I want to repent from who I was, God, and come to you, that like literally there's a celebration in heaven around that. That was your story. For some of you in this room right now, I hope it becomes your story as you're wrestling with your own faith and trying to explore what it means to follow Jesus. But is that our heart? What's interesting, the wrong things have often get celebrated in Christianity. When you look at what's happened over the years in the church, and certain things have gotten propped up. In the 80s, there was a big movement of the attractional church model, and there was some good in it, and then there was some bad in it. And some of the things that got propped up were like the show of church, and trying to like blow people away with certain things that if we could just like entertain them, then guess what? Like we could get them then. It's like, look at this shiny new toy and all these lights, all these things we can do. And it's like, ooh, you're here, now we got you. None of that worked to some degree. It actually did. There was some good that came from it. But here's when it started to happen. The end result of that kind of mindset in the 70s and 80s in particular, and it kind of bled through and led to some other bad habits and the wrong things getting celebrated in the church world. And the pinnacle of it was actually recently when in every single generation had registered the largest decline in American church history. That was the end result of celebrating the wrong things. Here's the good news. Recently, within the last year, there's been this huge uptick in people exploring, wondering, seeing that what the world has to offer is not good. It doesn't end well. And so people, like Google searches are way up of people trying to like figure out about Jesus, about faith, about purpose, about why am I here, all of this stuff. And it's way up. The younger generations are exploding with this faith in Jesus. And these little movements are happening all across the world right now. There's something so beautiful happening, but we will miss it if we're numb. We'll miss it if we've got too much junk around us. We'll miss it if we don't have the right heart to celebrate what God actually celebrates. I was listening to this guy talk this past week. He's a guy I listen to quite frequently. He's from Australia, and he's a brilliant, brilliant mind. And he was reading an article how in the UK, in about 8 to 10 years in the UK, there will be no more nightclubs. And he's explaining how like no one's going out anymore. No one's hanging out, no one's buying alcohol, everyone's just lonely, disconnected. And his point was like people are starving for connection and realize they're not finding it in nightclubs, but they're still wondering and searching and trying to find connection. And it's like, and here's this wonderful opportunity for the church, but are we willing and have the heart to step in it? And be like, you can find it here. Is that your heart? Is that your desire? Is that your longing? Does your heart break when you hear something like that? Or you're like, oh, that's weird. There's something that stirs in your soul. He was also talking about these two books. The book 1984 by George Orwell, which is a pretty famous book, and then another one, Brave New World, by Aldous Huxley. Orwell's book was written in 1949. The other book was written in 1932. And they were kind of prophetic books to talk about, hey, like this is what it looks like where culture's going. And so in Orwell's book in 1984, he talks about kind of this colorless life that becomes so dull and so numb, and then the government and the powers like will dictate the human existence everywhere. All right, and then the book Brave New World talks about that people take this drug, and this drug, it actually makes them feel good because they get good things, it makes them feel good, but it becomes numb to the world around them. It's the same end result. And the guy was talking, and he goes, now which one are we in? It's like, it's debatable all across the world. But yet there's this thing that's happening. It's like, man, are we numb? Or does our heart break for the things that break the heart of God? Do we have a passion and a desire to see what God could actually do and celebrate what God wants to celebrate? I think about this story that we say we believe in. If you're a follower of Jesus here, this is the story you say you believe in. And I love this passage. This guy named Paul is writing it to this church of Philippi, and it's about this new church that's come to faith in Jesus. He's trying to help them understand what it means to follow Jesus and have the right heart. And he says this, in your relationships, all right? So he's saying how we interact with one another everywhere. Not just who you're really close with, like everywhere. He says, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of servant, being made in human likeness. But it didn't stop there. And being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, the lowest possible place, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at that name, Jesus, every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth under earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. I was thinking about this passage because I'm like, this is the story we say we believe in. Is that what, like, your heart towards other people is like, let me tell you this story. Like, the God we serve, in this message, you cannot find it in any other religious belief. This message that God decided to humble himself in such a way to come in human likeness, and this is like the model he's setting for our human relationships. You have a position of privilege, a position of authority, a position that's like high. It's like, man, you humble yourself in such a way into the lowest place so that everyone else can experience life. That's what we say we believe. So God loved us so much that he's like, man, I'm going to humble myself in this way so that you, through the death of the cross and resurrection that we believe in, and then we talk about it in the Christian faith, so that you can go from death to life. And that what Paul says is like, if we follow Jesus, like that's our heart towards other people. They're like, we want to figure out, like, what do I need to do to like make sure that other people come to know the reality and the truth of Jesus? What am I willing to to put myself, I might be in a high position, but how do I like get out of that high position so I can leverage that for the good of others? Now you might be thinking, yeah, but we set this up it's about me. I was like, no. This is not about us. Like, yeah, is there a personal element to our faith? Of course there is. But like our hearts are oriented towards like, no, this love of other people, to love one another, to submit to one another, to care for one another, take each other's burdens, to forgive one another, serve one another. It's like that is my heart. But what happens when things build up, we become numb to it. We become numb to the story. We become numb to the message. And we can't remember the last time we had any emotion towards someone coming to know Jesus. This saying, what breaks your heart, is from this guy named Andy Stanley. I'm not saying he's the first one that asked it, but years ago he had this teaching through the book of Nehemiah. And he was trying to get people to like wrestle with finding a pathway that God could use them. And he's like, hey, what actually breaks your heart? Like, what is it that gets you going that you're like, man, I would give up my life for that, you know? And it's like this kind of big thing to think about, and it gets you to like think about your gifts and where God has put you and all this stuff. And I'm like, there's actually a step before that, I think. Because that idea of like what breaks your heart should be our baseline. Like the baseline should be like our hearts deeply break when people don't know Jesus. That is the baseline. If it doesn't, let me just put this out there. You can take it on, you can wear it for a second, whatever. If our hearts don't break for those that don't know Jesus, then maybe we don't love Jesus like we think we do. Maybe we've had too much junk build up and we haven't done a cleaning in quite a long time. Do our hearts really break for people to know Jesus? One of my prayers recently, over the last several weeks, so we typically have, Any Sunday, we average between 1,500 to 1,700 people come in this building on a Sunday. And so my prayer has been, over the last several weeks, hey, God, I want to see just as many people come to a knowledge of who you are as we currently have in our church. So like, when we have 1,600, 1,700 people showing up on a Sunday, I'm praying that 1,600 to 1,700 people will come to a new faith in Jesus by the end of the year, and they come here to our church, part of our community. That's what I'm praying. And on the front end, that sounds like, whoa, that's a lot of people. How would we fit such people? Who cares? Like, we'll figure it out when we get there. But like, you're like, wow, that feels overwhelming. I'm like, it's actually not, because it's just one per person in this room. It's just one per person to have the heart, to like have people that you pray for, that you're around, that you work with, that you go to school with, that you're friends with. The heart to see one. Is that the kind of heart that you have, or you become numb? It's funny how our algorithms work, and was whether our phones listen to us or not, I don't know. But I was prepping this message, and I was just looking at Instagram, and a reel came up of this guy who's talking about the singer James Taylor, who he's a pretty famous singer. He wrote How Sweet It Is, You've Got a Friend in Me, and a bunch of other songs. But he's a huge James Taylor fan, and so he was like paying attention to his music. It's like, man, there's like a lot of spirituality here. And so he was just Googling like James Taylor and Jesus and spirituality. And so he comes across this interview in Rolling Stone, and James Taylor is talking about like, hey, like, the interviewer is asking James Taylor, like, what, do we raised in a Christian home? They're like, you got a lot of spirituality in your songs. And he's like, actually, no, I'm agnostic, and my parents were atheists, and but I'd be like super open if someone wanted to share something with me, because like there seems to be something bigger than me here, and I just don't know what that is. And so it was like an interesting interview. And so anyway, this guy is like reading the interview. He's like, man, I would love to share Jesus with James Taylor. And so he goes to one of his concerts recently, and he just waits in line, in the autograph line. And he's like looking, and James is like being super nice to everyone. And so he just like, I'm gonna go to the end of the line so that I get the most time. So he goes to the end of the line, and James Taylor comes up to him, and he's like, hey, I was reading that article about you in Rolling Stone about Jesus. And he's like, I just wanted to share with you like how much Jesus loves you. And then he died on a cross for you, and so you can experience like real life. He's kind of like talking about all this stuff with James Taylor. And James Taylor was like super kind and engaging, and he goes, thank you so much for sharing that. He's like, did you know that interview was 24 years ago? And the guy goes, I did not know that, okay? Here's what's crazy. One, it's really cool. The guy had such an unbelievable heart to want to see him come to know Jesus. Two, James Taylor also said this. That interview was 24 years ago, and you're the first person to ever share with me about Jesus. And you sit and you hear that, and you're like, oh, how could that happen? And then I think to myself, how many times have I let it go in my own life? How many times have you gone to work every day and had missed opportunities? And I'm not saying just missed opportunities to be just something like, do you know Jesus? I'm not saying that. But maybe I am also saying that. But like missed opportunities to actually like show someone what Jesus is like. To live and have a heart to love someone in such a way, and a desire to be like, man, I've been praying for this person all the time, and they're here in front of me. I got to figure this out. Missed opportunities when you hear someone say something like, I'm just trying to figure out life because I feel lost. And rather than your heart being so in tune with the idea of maybe sharing your faith and being like, there's my opportunity, it's so in tune, you miss it because you're like, I've been lost too. And you just move on because you're scared. You're fearful. Or maybe you just haven't been praying. And you're not engaged in that kind of way because your heart has gotten numb and celebrating things that God doesn't even celebrate. We've been sharing these stories, and the story that I want to share with you today is from Chance. And this is such a beautiful story of what it looks like to have a heart to see people to know Jesus. Chance just finished her freshman year at Randolph-Macon. And there's so much power in this story. And it would be a challenge to every single person in this room to begin to see, like, is this how I see the world around me? Is this how I see myself when I'm at school? Or when I'm at work? Or when I'm around people? Whatever it is. Is this the kind of heart that I have? So let's take a look at Chance's story.
Well, I didn't grow up going to church with my family or anything. I never entertained the thought as a child of having faith in anything, really, other than myself. Then I had some different friends who started to talk about their faith, and that was really cool because I'd never heard anybody talk about something like that, and it made me curious. And obviously high school is a really confusing time, as is just young adulthood in general. And I started really entertaining those questions that I had and those curiosities. It felt like I was able to wonder and not know, and also talk about my faith and talk about what I was excited about and what I really loved. As I had started navigating the process of exploring my faith and meeting new people and starting to ask those questions that I'd always had, and I finally felt like I had the courage and I was comfortable enough in my own skin to ask those questions. I had that confidence. I felt the Holy Spirit nudge me to be you don't need to be afraid of what people are going to think of you, because that was always something that I was concerned about. And I think that a lot of people who are my age, younger and older, and I guess it doesn't really matter, but I feel particularly a lot of people my age are very concerned about what other people think. And I was very concerned with what my family would think, or what my high school friends would think, and my home friends, or people that I grew up with when I was younger, or the people that I might meet in college. They're gonna be oh, she's the Jesus girl. Is that a problem? And then I came to realize no, it's not. That's who God made me to be. I would come to church every Sunday, and I prayed so much that I would find the right people to be around during college. I was really I've used this word a lot to describe how I felt about the social situation I was entering, was that I was petrified. And I was absolutely terrified that I wouldn't find friends, that I just wasn't, I don't know. I don't know if it was I don't think I'm good enough, but it was just I'm not gonna find the right people who are chasing after the same things. I prayed all the time that I would find that, and I prayed over the campus of Randolph-Macon that something was going to happen. Something was going to happen for the past graduates. Something was going to happen for all the freshmen who were coming in, all of the professors who worked there, all of the employees who worked there. There was going to be something that was going to go on, and I was going to get to be a part of it. I had the ability to feel all those feelings of anxiety and worry, and then pray through them all and surrender that all. And I'm seeing the blessing that I'm living in right now. The first Sunday where all my new college friends came with me, after service I was you don't understand, you don't know. I have to just tell you what you mean to me right now. And I never thought that I would be that person. And I feel oftentimes, and I've told a lot of people this, I feel why me? Who am I to invite somebody to church? I didn't grow up going to church. This isn't something that's been a part of my routine, and it's not always comfortable for me. It's not always yeah, I know this about the Bible. I know this, that, and the other. Oftentimes I don't feel like that, and for a long time at Randolph-Macon, people have been waiting for something bigger to happen, because they know that college students are always looking for something more, and that's the time where people explore whatever more is. A large mass of people would come to Jesus, and I feel that's starting to happen. I feel there is something happening, that sense of more. I was talking about with my friends, the fact that you might be the only time that somebody experiences church or someone's faith or the love of Jesus. You might be the only time that they're gonna see that. But oftentimes what I've thought about myself is why me? What am I gonna do about it? And I've come to realize after praying about it a lot, God will equip you for the right situations, and he'll get you ready for those things, and even when you don't feel ready, it doesn't really matter what you think because it's not about you. Like, all the glory is to God. Not everything's about feeling comfortable, and sometimes it's okay to be uncomfortable and have questions, and I feel like I've really been able to like dig deeper into that and feel more comfortable in being uncomfortable.
There's a beauty of wonder. There's so much wisdom in that. To begin to see the world around you in that kind of way, to begin to see people around you in that kind of way, to have the heart to celebrate what heaven celebrates, to be fixated on Jesus in all of this. Chance mentioned, people my age, they get so concerned with people, like, how they might see them, and I'm in my head, I'm like, man, I know so many adults that are like that. You go into work, or you go, and you're like, oh, I don't want to live that way. I don't want to talk that way. I don't want to. I'm like, yeah, but what if your heart changed? What would happen? What would your prayers sound like if your heart was deeply concerned with people coming to know Jesus? What would your prayers look like? What would your language be like? How would you begin to see people? What would it be like? Or have you become numb? One of the things that I think about is every single week people coming in here and the beauty of us being present. And one of the greatest ways that we can love each other is to be present with one another. To be present in the space, to be present in the moment, to be present when they're talking, to be present when you're kind of feeling the moment that God has with you and this other person. Every Sunday we have a chance to be present together. And it's not like a legalistic thing, but I'm like, man, do we understand this beauty of this moment, that you are in a room with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other people, and that there are some people in this room that are having a life-changing moment that completely reroutes who they are, completely reroutes decisions that they're making. They find forgiveness, they find hope, they find life, they find all these things, and you being present become part of the story. Do we see it that way? Do we see it that way when we're interacting with people, the possibility of something happen like that? What would happen in our prayers? What would happen in our vision? What would happen in our words if we began to see the world around us in this way? I love in the passage of Hebrews 12 when he talks about running the race. He's like, to fix our eyes on Jesus. That's forward thinking. I'm fixing my eyes on Jesus. I realize the present things that I'm going through and all that stuff and what's happened in my past. But when it talks about it, he's like, Jesus, and here's what he's doing. He knows he's going to the cross. He knows suffering and pain is happening. But he also sees what's beyond that, and it brings him joy. It's like, do I see people in that same way? The possibility of what's beyond that pain, beyond that suffering, beyond that being lost? Do I see them in that way? Have a heart for them in that way? To begin to see the world around me in that way. I love this passage out of Ephesians 3. Because when I think about being present, I think what it means to gather, when I think what it means to understand what a Sunday is, a Sunday isn't a point. Here is the reality. Most, not all, most stories of people coming to faith happen on a Sunday. Most, not all. And so this is a big deal to gather. It's a really big deal. And how I see Sundays are two things. It's a launching pad for the week, but it's also a pivot point for the moment. That we all have this thing that's man, when the Spirit of God begins to move, it's we're in this together, and we're challenging one another, and we're holding each other accountable. And that's why I want some of the language we've been talking about is a little more aggressive, in community. It's well, why wouldn't it be if it's this serious? Why wouldn't it be if we deeply care? If I said to you, I'm going to give you $1 million if you can invite 10 people to church this year, how many guys would do it? But if I said to you, a cloud of witnesses are cheering you on if you invite 10 people to church this year, are you equally excited, more excited, or actually it doesn't register? And so it's understanding that what I'm trying to get into this space is We get to be together, and I get it. Not everyone can be here every week because life happens and whatever. But I'm like, to be present, to be part of when someone has a life change, to when you need a life change. To have the opportunity to declare something is so powerful. The same guy, Paul, who wrote to the church in Philippi, he said this about Jesus. His intent was that now, through the church, the manifold wisdom of God should be made known to the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly realms. And I'm going to stop there because I just want you to take that in for a second. That through the church and through a gathering like this, and there are other ways that the church expresses itself. But this isn't a habit. In this moment, we are proclaiming something to the heavenly realms. It's that serious. It's that weighty. It's why, for many of us in this room, having that emotional, unbelievable moment when the Spirit of God grips your heart and something deeply changes inside of you because there's something more going on than just this moment. It's bigger than that. And do we have the heart, the desire to want to see that for people? That's the challenge. You guys can come back up, singers. So I just want you to bow your heads for a second. To just pause and take this in. And we're going to sing something that the words that we're about to sing together, it's just going to be really mostly voices. And the words that we're going to sing together are incredibly, incredibly important. It's speaking something to the heavenly realms. It's declaring something of what we desire. But I want you to just sit for just a second and come to grips with where's my heart really at? Does it break for people that know Jesus? Do I see myself as a business owner, a manager, a teacher, a student, a coach, a businessman, a businesswoman, a mom, a father? Do I see myself being in a position to do all that I can to see others come to know Jesus? That's at the heart. Can you imagine what it would be like to have that kind of heart? Can you imagine what God would do if you put yourself in that position spiritually, physically, emotionally? Can you imagine? Will you stand and sing this with us?